The $1 million gap. Why excellence isn't enough. Good evening, everyone. I stand before you today with insights that will challenge everything you thought you knew about success, equity, and achievement in America. These revelations come from my transformative conversation with Danielle Forbes, a visionary advocate whose groundbreaking research and fearless activism have fundamentally reshaped how we understand economic justice for Black women in this country. Danielle isn't just collecting data, she's igniting a revolution. Through her relentless pursuit of truth and accountability, she has forced institutions to confront uncomfortable realities and inspired thousands to join a movement that refuses to accept systemic inequality as inevitable. Her work stands as testimony to the power of combining rigorous analysis with moral courage. When I first sat down with Danielle, I expected we would discuss familiar themes of perseverance and professional advancement. What emerged instead was a profound challenge to the very foundation of American meritocracy, a challenge that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about hard work and reward. We've all heard the narrative, haven't we? Education is the great equalizer. Work hard, get those degrees, climb the corporate ladder, and prosperity will follow. It's a comforting story, a story many of us have built our lives around, a story that feels fundamentally American. But what if I told you that for Black women in America, this story contains a devastating plot twist? Despite decades of advocacy and remarkable progress in education and leadership roles, Black women continue to face a persistent and, in some cases, widening wage gap, regardless of their qualifications or achievements. This isn't just a minor discrepancy, it's a chasm. The latest data Danielle shared with me is staggering. Black women with bachelor's degrees earn just 62.7% of what white men make. Think about that for a moment. 62.7 cents on the dollar. And here's what's truly shocking. Even at the highest educational levels, with master's or professional degrees, Black women still only earn about 59 to 64% compared to their white male counterparts. This reality fundamentally challenges the narrative that working twice as hard is enough. It exposes deep seated structural barriers that exist beyond individual effort. As Danielle Forbes explained during our conversation, the wage gap for Black women persists across all education levels and professions, meaning systemic inequities cannot be solved by personal advancement alone. Let that sink in. We're not talking about a gap that closes as you climb higher. We're talking about a gap that sometimes widens the higher you go. The more qualified you become, the more pronounced the disparity grows. The cruel irony is breathtaking. The implications of this reality extend far beyond a smaller paycheck. Over a typical career span, Black women can lose over $1 million in earnings due to pay inequity. $1 million. That's not just money, that's generational wealth. That's financial security. That's educational opportunities for children. That's retirement dignity. That's the difference between owning and renting, between building assets and living paycheck to paycheck. This loss affects not just individuals, but families and communities for generations. It perpetuates cycles of disadvantage that have historical roots but contemporary consequences. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. This is terrible, but what can I possibly do about something so systemic? This is where Danielle Forbes's insights become truly transformative. Because while individual excellence alone cannot solve structural problems, collective advocacy absolutely can. Let me share three powerful examples from our conversation that illustrate both the depth of the problem and the pathways toward meaningful change. First, consider the work of Powher New York, an organization advocating for economic justice among Black women professionals. Their research revealed that Black women in New York earned just 66 cents per dollar compared with white men, resulting in that lifetime loss exceeding $1 million per person I mentioned earlier. But Power didn't just document the problem, they launched public awareness campaigns marking the Black Women's Equal Pay Day, the symbolic day when Black women's earnings finally catch up to what white men earned the previous year. They engaged in legislative lobbying efforts targeting state pay transparency laws. Their work yielded results: increased public recognition of wage gaps, passage of stronger state level equal pay statutes, and mobilization against policy rollbacks that threaten to widen disparities. Founded by advocates responding to systemic discrimination, POWHAIR has influenced legislation on salary transparency and built coalitions amplifying voices from underrepresented groups. Their impact extends beyond New York, inspiring similar efforts nationwide. The second example comes from the Institute for Women's Policy Research, which regularly publishes comprehensive reports documenting racial and gender disparities in earnings across states and sectors. Their work documents the intersectional discrimination resulting from both racism and sexism, manifesting as unequal treatment even among highly educated and professional workers. IWPR doesn't just collect data, they use it to drive advocacy for policy reforms like pay equity enforcement and expanded paid leave. They partner with lawmakers pushing anti discrimination measures. Their reports have shaped national debates around equal pay legislation and provided evidence used by activists and policymakers seeking change at local, state, and federal levels. Since its founding amid broader movements for gender and racial equality in labor markets, IBA has produced influential reports cited widely by media and government officials during major legislative pushes on fair wages and equity initiatives. Their work has informed policies supporting millions of working families affected by race and gender based economic injustice. The third example brings us to the lived experiences behind these statistics. A large scale poll commissioned by Essence magazine captured attitudes among thousands of Black American female voters regarding current economic and political realities. Respondents reported record high pessimism about worsening conditions, a dramatic spike since COVID era lows. Major concerns included falling wages, rising costs, eroding healthcare access, and declining educational prospects. The resulting op ed called out policymakers' failures while uplifting community driven solutions rooted in fairness, care, and dignity. It elevated national discourse about urgent needs facing Black communities and catalyzed conversations around sustainable policy interventions rather than temporary fixes. Conducted amidst ongoing rollbacks threatening civil rights and protections historically championed through grassroots activism, this poll provided an empirical foundation supporting calls to action from leading advocates. Most importantly, it helped shift the public narrative towards centering the lived experiences and expertise of those most affected. What these examples reveal is that while the problem is structural, the solutions are collective. As Danielle Forbes emphasized in our conversation, achieving equity requires not only personal excellence, but also bold policy changes like enforcing pay equity laws, expanding access to affordable care services, and addressing workplace discrimination to ensure fair opportunities for all. This is where philosophy intersects powerfully with economic justice, because dropping the superwoman cape isn't just about personal boundaries. It's about recognizing that the expectation to overcome systemic barriers through sheer individual effort is itself a form of oppression. When we talk about learning to say no without guilt, we must include saying no to accepting inequitable compensation. When we discuss healing from trauma, we must acknowledge the economic trauma inflicted by systemic wage theft. When we embrace softness as a radical act of self love, we must extend that love to demanding the dignity of fair compensation. In the words of Audre Lorde, caring for myself is not self indulgence, it is self preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. Economic justice is self care at the collective level. So, where do we go from here? How do we translate awareness into action? First, we must recognize that silence around pay perpetuates inequity. Salary transparency, discussing compensation openly with colleagues, helps expose disparities that might otherwise remain hidden. Second, we must support organizations fighting for structural change. The advocacy groups I've mentioned need our voices, our votes, and yes, our financial support. Third, we must hold employers accountable. Companies that tout diversity in their marketing but maintain pay gaps in their payroll deserve our scrutiny and pressure. Fourth, we must recognize that this isn't just women's issue or a Black issue. It's an economic justice issue that affects all of us. When we systematically undervalue the contributions of Black women, we diminish our collective prosperity. And finally, we must embrace the power of collective action. Individual excellence matters, but it's not enough. True change requires solidarity, advocacy, and a willingness to challenge systems rather than just navigate them. I stand before you today not just to share information, but to issue a challenge to reject the comforting lie that merit alone determines success, a challenge to confront the uncomfortable truth that systems designed to privilege some will continue to disadvantage others unless we actively dismantle them. This is not about charity. This is about justice. This is not about helping others. This is about creating a society that works for all of us, where talent, dedication, and hard work are rewarded fairly regardless of gender or race. So I ask you, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you continue to navigate a broken system, or will you help rebuild it? Will you accept inequality as inevitable, or will you join the movement to end it? The $1 million gap is real, but so is our power to close it together. The time for awareness is past. The time for action is now. And that action begins with you, with me, with all of us refusing to accept that excellence isn't enough. Thank you